look at is literature, okay? It's a 2-hour exam, and it's worth 90 marks. So with literature and language, you get one paper that's worth 90, one worth 60. Okay, it's 90, 60, 90, 60. One exam is 2 hours, or 2 hours, 15 minutes, and the other one's usually 1.5 hours. Okay, so the first question was a poetry question. You had an unseen poem which you've never seen before in your life. You then had a poem that you had studied with me before. And then you had to look at a prose, okay, in which case it's Of Mice and Men for you. Okay, so the first one was your poem, okay? So unfinished poem, you had to read it, you had to look at it, look at the symbolism. Remember styles, okay? So the setting, the imagination or imagery that's created, okay? But we're looking at things like language, techniques. We're looking at the message that the poet is putting across to us, whether the message is effective or not. These are all the different areas that you should be thinking about, or you should be writing down at the top of your page. When you get your poem like this, I would write down here, okay, there we go, and then I would follow that through. So content, imagery, language, structure, and emotions or effectiveness, okay, that's what it stands for. And then I would tick it off if I've used any of those in my exam, so that I know that I've got it correct or not, okay? So styles at the top of any unseen poem, please. That's the first thing to say. Explore how the writer presents nature in this poem, okay? Descriptive language, choice of language, this is all styles again. So, you know, I would have put styles either there or here. There we go, styles. And then you'd be using that, okay? Generally speaking, it's a 20-mark question. You don't need to spend ages on it. So depending how much time you took. But we're looking at things like the basic techniques for you know, is it poetry that rhymes? Is it not rhyming? Is there any specific technique that stands out? How is nature presented? Is it a positive or a negative vibe, etc., etc.? There is no right or wrong answer. The only wrong answer I would say is one that doesn't actually look at the different elements of a poem. So it doesn't use styles, basically, okay? So if you weren't able to, for example, give me an idea of how the poem begins, how it ends, structure, then there's a problem because you've only looked at half of what the possibilities are, okay? So you need to ensure that you are fully engaging with the question and answering the question, not just going off on a tangent and talking about seeds and plants, for example, okay? So the response is simple and the identification of language, form, structure used by the writer is minimal, okay? That was a level 1. Limited use of relevant examples in support. Whereas if we jump to the positive, the level 4 and above, the response is focused, detailed, analysis of language, form, structure used by the writer and their effect on the reader is sustained. The effect on the reader, guys. If you want the higher marks, make sure you are commenting on the effect on the reader, okay? Relevant examples as well from the poem are used to support your response. So you need little quotations, not big things. You could literally pick a word out and talk about the fact that he uses the word seed rather than pod or anything that jumps out at you, okay? Okay, I'm going to move on to section B now. So you had a choice. You could read Half Caste and Remember, which is looking at, you know, the idea of heritage, okay, or racism, if you like, versus themes of grief. Or you could reread Half Past Two, okay? Half Past Two being the sort of mindset of a child and time, how time is presented to us, and, you know, the difference between childhood and adulthood, if you like, okay? For the second one, so the number 3, the reread Half Past Two, you had a choice to compare against any poem you wanted. You're not given a choice for number 2. If it says Half Caste and Remember, you have to only look at those 2. You can't choose a different poem, okay? That's just something to bear in mind. Having said that, though, from an examiner's perspective, if I found that you had still given me a full valid answer for Half Caste and another poem, I don't think I would mark you down, okay? I would still try and gain as many marks as I can for you. But just please be aware that it can affect your mark if you are going to pick the wrong poem, because it shows you don't know the poems, okay? Now, this was worth 30 marks, this one. Whichever question you selected here from section B was worth 30 marks. I'm just going to quickly go through what was required for it. Right, here we go. First up is you're not going to get more than a level 2 if you don't compare the 2 poems. You remember the Venn diagrams? We've talked about those before, just to give you some idea or mapping out how you're going to answer a question, okay? So you would put styles at the top of your sheet still, okay, because it'll help, because you're going to compare content in both, imagery in both, language in both. You can do that. That is possible. The main thing, though, for these ones, I felt was content. Okay, let me just go back to compare the way the writer presents being alone. Compare the way the writer expresses their feelings. Okay, now feelings is a good one. It's an open one because it's open to interpretation. If anybody struggled with that, of course, you know, we can explore this in more detail another time. But when it talks about feelings, we could talk about the positives and the negatives, anger, sadness. You know, there's a lot more to go on. Whereas talking about feeling alone in Half Past Two in another poem, it's more singular, it's more focused, and that could be a little bit more tricky to answer. So always look at it when you're looking at the choice question. Which question gives you more sort of area to work around, okay, where you can give more than one perception. All right, so if we talk about themes of, for example, happiness, happiness could come into, you know, love and excitement and all kinds of different things, whereas if it just focuses on I don't know, youth, it's just focused on young people, you know, it'd be a bit different, a bit narrow, if you like. So look at the themes very carefully. Okay, then the final one. So can I just remember, guys, for question section A and section B, make sure you put in styles up somewhere in the corner and using that to help guide you through your answers, okay? Section C, I wanted you to really get in there with Of Mice and Men, all right? You needed to kind of prove to me that you understood the text. Now, majority of you did that. I have to say I was quite impressed with some of the answers I was reading. The only thing I will say was there was a few times where I was thinking, oh, this is going too much of a narrative style rather than giving me your views from a contextual perspective. Can you please write this down? For section C in your literature paper 1, you need to give me historical context. Because when it comes to revising for Of Mice and Men, it's very important you understand what time period it was written in, what was going on at the time. There's no use just telling me, oh, Candy, bless him, you know, he's weak, he's vulnerable, he's just like with a stump or an arm, and you know, he's a bit of a gossip on the in the farm, etc. No, what does he represent of mankind during the Great Depression? What is Steinbeck trying to show us by using the character of Candy? Okay. In this case, explore the significance of Curly in the novel. Well, Curly is a representation of those in charge within governments, within societies who hold the power. How do people who hold the power during the Great Depression, how would they behave? How was the corruption? What was the corruption like at the time? How were people abused and used at the time? That is all the sorts of characteristics that Curly represents. The way he treats women, the way he treats newcomers, the way he treats the elderly, okay? How important he sees himself, how everything is focused on him, okay? These are the sorts of themes you're meant to be exploring, okay, from a contextual perspective. In what ways is death important in Steinbeck's Of Mice and Men? Again, another very interesting theme. Think about the mice. Think about the animal kingdom, okay? How it's so easy how one animal's killed, another one is brought in its place. Okay, when one person dies, another person's brought in. If somebody does something wrong, people just crowd in and beat the, you know, living daylights out of them till they're dead. Okay, look at how cheap life was during that time. How easy it was to replace people because of poverty, because of the desperate situations they were in. Okay, so that is literature paper 1. Okay, that is it. That was the full literature paper 1.